and noise. So I wait for these precious moments when I hear all that could never be said, and right here in this joyous moment I find God, I find myself. In the silence there is peace. In the silence there is unspoken joy. In the silence there's relief from a world full of chaos and noise. So I wait for these precious moments. I hear all that never be said, and right here in this broken silence I find God, I find So I wait for these precious moments. I hear all that never be said, and right here in this holy silence I find God, I find God, I find myself.
Oh, thank you, Candace. Oh, thank you so much. Oh. You know, the silence can be a place when we rest in that silence, and whatever form that is, like meditation and opening up, things, new awarenesses can come about. And the other day, Petra and I were doing a meditation practice, and then we had our coffee and our tea together, and we were having a conversation. And we were talking about something because there was a little something between us from the night before, a little big something between us. We had had this wonderful conversation, and out of the silence,
That would be a euphemism.
I know nobody else has those kind of conversations in marriage. I was talking with Petra, and I said, okay, I have to I have to say that my mother was not ever satisfied in any moment. And I was sharing with Petra, like, my mother, she just wasn't ever satisfied with anything. No matter what was going on, it just wasn't good enough, or whatever it was. And I shared with Petra a big fear that I had. And that fear that I was feeling in that moment, and from that discussion the night before, was that Petra was not ever going to be satisfied in certain ways. And as that came out of my mouth, because I was, projecting that onto her, I had what Oprah would say, a big ass aha moment. And my world got rocked, and I started crying with this cracking open, this new awareness inside of me. I couldn't even speak for a while. I had to catch my breath and be able to share with her what just happened inside of Karen through this awareness. And it was like, oh my God, I'm the one that doesn't savor the moment. I'm the one that's not satisfied in so many ways, in experiences and circumstances. I'm thinking of the next thing, or the next moment, or only if this. And I just went, well, I know where I got that from, but I'm also now, instead of having, up until that moment, having that awareness, I was doing, you're the problem. And I had to realize, and I'm still cracked open about it, because this just happened this week, that this is a spiritual practice that I must take up, is to savor the moment. Be satisfied of this moment right here with you. Nothing else is happening but right here. And begin to practice this savoring of these moments, every moment. But it was through self-awareness that I got cracked open.
Yeah, and so important for us to have these moments, right? And allow ourselves to have these moments, and whether it's in relationship or whether it's wherever we're having the moment of that self-awareness, right? And Karen was really able to identify that because she practices. She practices all kinds of spiritual practices. We, as a couple, practice spiritual practices. Self-awareness is, in fact, one of our 10 fundamental spiritual practices that we teach here at CSLDallas and in the Science of Mind. And without the ability to become self-aware, we don't notice that we're projecting. We don't notice that we're still playing out our childhood patterns. We don't notice that we've taken it on and are now living from a place that we don't actually want to be living from, right? And then we have the opportunity for this enormous awareness. And so that's what we're talking about all month in the month of August. Practice, practice, practice. That we are constantly being invited into a deeper spiritual practice. Sometimes our spiritual practice is a very formal practice, meditation, spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer, right? These are very formal spiritual mind practices that we sit down and we do. But as you heard Oscar and Candace share, there's also what I consider informal spiritual practice, which is equally as important spiritual practice. And it's the day-by-day, moment-by-moment practicing of awareness, of self-awareness, of being in nature, being with loved ones, all those ways in which we are paying attention to whether or not we are aligned with spirit, whether we are living a life that is aligned with love and allowing God to be the I am that I am, or whether we're off on some other way of being that doesn't really serve us as well. And so practice, practice, practice. Now, in the Science of Mind, Centers for Spiritual Living has sought to articulate what our principles and practices are and how we engage with them. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that today to kind of ground this whole month.
So Ernest Holmes, in the Science of Mind textbook, 1938 edition, mind you, in one of the 4 introductory chapters, it's the 4th one, it's called How to Use It. It begins this way: how to use it. Very important. He says, one of the great difficulties in the new order of thought is that we are likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice. As a matter of fact, we only know as much as we can prove by actual demonstration. That which we cannot prove may or may not be true, but that which we can prove certainly must be and is the truth.
Yeah, and so this is why in the biblical, in the Christian tradition, it says, "Prove me now," right? We're proving that a life aligned with God, a life lived in the context of our spirituality, does in fact make a difference. And we don't want to just talk about how the theory. We don't want to just talk about how nice it is to think that we're a part of the whole, and to think that the trajectory of life is actually toward good. And I mean, these are all lovely things to talk about and think about, but if we aren't actually practicing it, it's not going to make a difference.
Yeah, and I really love in putting Science of Mind principles into practice. Over these 15 some odd years that I've been studying and practicing, I know this one's true because I've proven it. I know abundance is true because I've proven it. I know, et cetera, et cetera. And it's because I've put it into practice that I have more belief that it's true. And with that belief, from practice, then that belief gets bigger and on and on and on. And I'm like, no, this is true. And so sometimes I come across like, I don't know, arrogant or whatever, because I just undoggedly, this is true. I know this is true because I've demonstrated it.
Yeah, and one of the things about practice, right, is we often associate practice makes perfect, right? And yeah, that's one way that we can think about it. Practice makes perfect. We've proven it to ourselves, and we are now unshakable in our faith. We've proven that being in alignment with Spirit makes a difference. To me, that's only one side of the idea of practice, because spiritual practice is an ongoing practice. So when we think about practice in other ways, we can think about practice as learning a skill, demonstrating that we know that skill and how to use it, and ultimately it's about living that which we are practicing, that which we say we believe. Spiritual practice becomes then a way of life. It's not something that we're trying to, it's not only that we're trying to learn a skill, it's not only that we're having a particular experience or arriving at some accomplished place. It's about living out of mastery. And I loved it when Oscar said he didn't used to like to practice music, right? But now he practices music because he's in his mastery of it. And it moves him into a different place. And there's a practice of alignment, of oneness, of total engagement of our whole being and our whole sense of who we are. And when we're in mastery, we're constantly honing our craft. It's not like we've arrived and we're never going to do it again, right? It's like thinking we're going to go to the gym, we're going to work out for a year, get all buff, and then say, okay, I've arrived. Good, that's good. Now I can eat what I want and do what I want for the rest of my life. Yeah, right? Not so much. So we have to keep engaging with that. And so there's something about spiritual practice that isn't practice to acquire, and it isn't practice to accomplish. It's practice because it's the dailiness of staying engaged with our craft. And what is our craft? But spiritual living. That's our craft.
Yeah, so, all right, so this practice that I'm taking up called Savoring the Moment, I'm really grateful that I'm not having to go it alone. So I know most of you know that we have a beautiful granddaughter who's just over 3 months old, REFA wise, and she's helping me savor the moment. I'm not having to just like do this alone. So every time that I'm with her, because she actually, I can't get away with anything with her. You know, she might be on the little blanket on the ground and she's just smiling and we're locking eyes and I'm savoring the moment and it's going so well. I mean, really, it's like I'm fully present and I'm savoring the moment because she's smiling at me and I'm singing to her and all this. And then I'm like, then guess what? I have this thing that I've not done my whole life called Savoring the Moment. And then I go, okay, yeah, she's good right there. And I pick up a device and I'll start, looking at something. And she doesn't like that. She wants my full attention. And she will start talking to me and let me know, like, no, you're not savoring the moment. You're not here. You're with that thing that looks like a phone. She already knows what it is. And she knows it's taken me away from her. She don't like that. And so she's truly helping me learn what savoring the moment and being fully present is all about. So thank you, REFA. I want you to watch this somewhere down the road when you hear about me talking about this device.
And so that's another way. Do you see that's another way of practicing? Right? So again, an informal but very conscious way of practicing. And so I think that's a big piece of it, is when we are consciously engaged in spiritual living, we are practicing it, which means we are seeking to live it more and more and more. And so when we talk about practicing, like what Karen, all of the examples that Karen has shared with us is actually in alignment with the second spiritual practice that Science of Mind, that Centers for Spiritual Living has articulated for the Science of Mind. And it is the practice called practicing the presence. Practicing the presence. And so practices, let me back up a little bit and say practices teach us how to and provide the means to apply the principles in our lives, right? So we have the principles that we teach in Science of Mind, but it's not enough to just know them. These practices include primary methodologies that we teach in our classes that we use to apply our principles. Each practice may help us apply all the principles, but each practice is associated with specific principles that it really helps us to dive into. So we talk about principles, practices, and methods. The principle is the fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief, behavior, or chain of reasoning, right? That's the theory part. Super important, but not enough. Practice, the application or use of the principle as opposed to simply theories relating to it. The application or use of the principle in our lives, not just being able to talk about it and say how wonderful it is. And then the methods are procedures, systematic procedures or techniques or modes or tools that are applied so that we can practice the principles. When we talk about spiritual practice, often people dive right into a method, nature, meditation, journaling, right? These are all methods for practicing our principles. So this what Karen is practicing is the principle of oneness and practicing the presence. So we describe practicing the presence as the practices of the principles of oneness, love, and creation. It's to become aware of and experience the one infinite reality, God, to make that absolutely present in our own lives. The practice of the presence is engaging in formal, disciplined methodologies that quiet the mind and body and open awareness. Beyond these formal methodologies, it is living in alignment with our principles, making these principles evident in the way we engage in the present moment, thereby being congruent in thought, word, and behavior. Do you see, it's great to say we're one, and it's great to say that we're showing up as love, but if I can't give my granddaughter the presence that she wants and needs from me because I'm so busy reading my devices, I'm not actually living the theory that I say is so important, right? Do you see? And so it's the bringing all of these things together. Now, the formal methods that we talk about for practicing the presence are meditation and mindfulness and visioning. But there are also these powerful informal practices that allow us and invite us into the moment. Because when you're present with your grandchild, you see God, and you see love, and you are reminded that this is the truth of each one of us, no matter who we are, no matter what the condition of our life is now. That is the truth of our being, innocence and love and purity from the get-go. Anything beyond that is a covering up we've learned over time. And that is a powerful reflection of this oneness that we teach.
Okay. And so there's the principle of oneness. And so we have the science of mind principles. And the principles of science of mind articulate the basic ideas and theories of philosophy of the science of mind. And so it helps us, these principles help us to understand the nature of reality, the infinite presence, the universal law, the nature of creation, and our place in it. And who we are in the scheme of things, right? And so the principles are more than just intellectual ideas. They form the foundation for the way we engage in and co-create our lives with this universal presence. So this idea or this principle of oneness, what we have to say about it from Centers for Spiritual Living and Science of Mind is there is one infinite reality. We call it many names. You get to choose what you call it, right? Including, but not limited to God, life, universal spirit, infinite intelligence, first cause, or the thing itself. The one infinite reality is undivided. It's complete. It's whole within itself. This oneness creates everything out of itself and therefore includes both the absolute and relative, tangible and intangible, physical and metaphysical aspects of reality.
So I guess that means everything.
Just about. No,
omnipresence, yes. Right? Isn't that what omnipresence means?
That's
everything.
Right. So we have the principles and the practices, and we have placed them on our website so that you can see all of them. And so if you go to our website, and we want to encourage you to do this and copy them, paste them, keep them around. You go, there's a slider for the month of August. This month happening, practice, practice, practice. Click more information, and all of our principles and practices, including the methods with each of them, will be there.
All right. So we've talked about how these things go together. right? And so for me, this principle of oneness, I learned, of course, very early, that we're all part of the one, and that we're here to express this infinite life, and that everything, that omnipresence is actually an actual reality, and that everything is not only the presence of God, but it is made out of God, because there's nothing else it could be made out of. And so in the tradition that I was raised in, Roman Catholicism, they talked about pray without ceasing. Well, I learned the Lord's Prayer, and I learned the Ave Maria, and I learned all those prayers, and I went to confession, and then I came out, and then I was told I had to recite them 5 times this, 6 times that. And I thought, okay, praying without ceasing must mean you pray these prayers all the time, right? Well, I don't know how to pray those prayers and actually think about my shopping list or do my work, or because I'm thinking about, I'm trying to keep the prayer in mind. And so I was like, I don't really get this praying without ceasing thing. I don't get it. And so it was really reading Brother Lawrence's book, The Practice of the Presence of God. Actually, it's called Practicing the Presence. And he's a 13th century Christian monk in a monastery in Europe. And actually, the stories about him became so amazing that the local bishop of the area wanted to start having a correspondence. And this little book is his answers to the bishop's questions. How do you have this deep spiritual experience that you're having? How did they know Brother Lawrence was having the deep spiritual experiences that he was having? Well, he was literally levitating while he was trying to serve the soup to the other monks. And he was having these extraordinary experiences. And so the bishop was like, how do you do that? Well, there were 2 things Brother Lawrence writes in these letters that profoundly impacted me. The first one is, he said, well, it's come to the point where the times when I'm supposed to be in my cell meditating and contemplating on God, and the times that I'm out in the stable or the kitchen, I can no longer tell the difference. To walk around in daily life knowing that everything that's happening is God making itself manifest. He goes on to say this. He says, I cannot pick up a straw cleaning the kitchen. I cannot pick up a straw without realizing that that is God picking up that straw. I thought, I want that. I want that. I want to walk around in the world like that. I want to walk around in my life like that. I still couldn't bend my mind around praying without ceasing. What in the world does that mean? Do I have to be all pious and holy and always speak in a quiet voice? And can I never swear ever again? And do I always have to be nice? What does that mean? What does that mean? So here's the practice that I developed for myself. And I know it's going to sound really silly, but it made all the difference in the world to me. So I thought, praying without ceasing. Okay, as near as I can tell, that means that wherever I look and whatever I look at, whatever I see, I am seeing God. If that is the fact, then I can look at this piece of paper and say, God. I can look at this and say, God. I can look at this book and say, God. I can look at the floor and say, God. I can look at the sun and say, God. I can look at Karen and say, God. And I can look at the monitor and say, God. And I can look at the news and say, God. And I can look and God and God and God. And at first I started doing that and going, well, it looks like a chair to me. I don't really get it. God. Okay, God. Well, this is like, I don't really know. God and God and God. And I mean, we're talking days and weeks. God and God and God. And then all of a sudden it was like, God. 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 And it became a question. God. It became a question. How is this God? How is this God? How is this God? How is the floor God? How is the sun God? It became a question. That went on for some extended period of time until all of a sudden it was like, God. 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 God.
God.
Changed everything. Absolutely changed everything in my life. Everything. That was my practice.
I think people are going to get Brother Lawrence's book now, too. Yeah, breathe that in. So, this is the final conclusion in the Science of Mind textbook. Ernest Holmes wraps it all up right here. In conclusion, what the world needs is spiritual conviction, followed by spiritual experience. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principle than to have her repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it.
Go ahead.
But the practice of truth is personal to each, and in the long run, no one can live our life for us. To each is given what she needs, and the gifts of heaven come alike to all. How shall we use these gifts is all that matters. To hold one's thought steadfastly to the constructive, to that which endures, and to the truth may not be easy in a rapidly changing world, but to the one who makes the attempt, much is guaranteed. The essence of spiritual mind healing and of all true religious philosophy is an inner realization of the presence of perfection within and around about. It is the hope of heaven, the voice of God proclaiming, I am that which thou art. Thou art that which I am. And so it is.